So, is the World Bank impressed with the Buhari's administration? Joining me now is SHUBHAM CHAUDHURI, who is the World Bank Country Director for Nigeria. Good evening, sir. It's good to have you on the show.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I can hear you very loud and clear. Thanks for coming through. Let's get straight to business. What's your outlook on Nigeria's economic performance in the second half of 2020? We've seen the first half. What's your outlook on the second half of the year we're stepping into right now?
I think you quoted some of what we said in our report that was released just over a week ago. I think it's very much, we're waiting to see whether we're going to be somewhere near the baseline projection, which we had said a contraction of about 3.2% over the course of 2020, or something a bit worse, which was about 7.4% contraction. Or I think there's also a little bit of upside, and the upside really depends on, meaning a smaller contraction, and that upside really depends on, one, what the government does in terms of its policy measures, reform measures, but also globally, what happens with oil prices, what happens with the overall scale of activity in the global economy.
In terms of your strategic relationship and partnership with Nigeria, in what areas would you be working with the Nigerian authorities under this pandemic period? SHUBHAM.
Thanks. Look, we, as you may know, and as your audience may know, we're here in Nigeria to serve the longer-term development agenda in terms of helping Nigeria lift 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. So the way we've approached the current crisis is really to say, look, what can we do and what does Nigeria need to do to make sure that it survives this crisis, that it gets back, it mitigates the worst impacts of this crisis, and gets back on a trajectory to fully realizing its potential. So for us, number one in that was, how can we help the government marshal the fiscal resources? And by fiscal resources, you've seen what the Minister of Finance has said in terms of the impact of the drop in oil prices and the downturn in economic activity on government revenues, down by almost 65%, somewhere between, if you look at the Federation as a whole, you're talking about somewhere between 10 to $15 billion. So the first point of our support has been to try and work with our government partners to say, okay, how can Nigeria marshal these fiscal resources? And the approach is very similar to what a household would do if, say, all of a sudden the main income earner lost their job. What would they do? They would try to say, look, are there other sources of income that we haven't tapped into? Are there other ways we can bring a bit more money into the household? That's number one. Second is, let's look at where we can cut back. Where can we redirect our spending? So maybe we don't go for new clothes this year. Instead, we prioritize those things that are absolutely essential and will help us in the future. And an example of what would help you in the future, it's a household might say, look, we have to keep our kids in school and do whatever we can to come up with the money to pay the tuition. So that's the second part of what we're helping and working with government on, is redirecting expenditures, trying to help in terms of rolling out a fiscal stimulus plan, pro-poor fiscal stimulus to help protect livelihoods, as well as sustain local economic activity, micro, small, medium enterprises. And third is really looking at the policy reforms that can help bring in, kind of restore confidence amongst investors, give domestic firms the confidence that, that things are getting better and that they start investing and creating jobs again. Because ultimately, government cannot do it all. It has to be, the private firms are the ultimate source of economic growth and job creation. So these are the three main areas.
Yes, SHUBHAM, you've seen the new economic sustainability plan. I'm sure you listened to the finance minister for the Mtef 2021-2023 and the budget 2020. So do you think all this put together will be enough to get Nigeria to mitigate the impact of the virus and grow ahead?
I think a lot of the right ingredients are there. Look, ultimately, it'll come down to two things. One is the robustness of the implementation. A plan is a plan until it is implemented. And there are many elements of this plan which will require really solid coordination amongst different parts of government and different levels of government, and really translating the plan into concrete action. So I think that's a big kind of prerequisite for the plan, which has many of the right ingredients to really help in this context. In terms of the MTEF and the fiscal stimulus, look, Nigeria's fiscal stimulus compared to many other emerging economies is less than compared to other countries. Part of the reason is precisely what I said before, which is that Nigeria is more constrained than many other countries in terms of fiscal resources. So ideally, it would have been good to see a greater fiscal stimulus, but in the current context, given Nigeria's the fiscal constraints, I think the fact that the government has very explicitly, recognized the need for more spending and that it has made an effort to cut back on spending in certain areas, I think is very much in the right direction.
Shubham, a very quick and a final one. Nigeria is waiting for the first tranche of about 1.5 billion US dollars from the World Bank in terms of facility, while the central bank has moved to adjust the exchange rates on the markets. Are you in tune with these developments?
Yes, we are very much. In fact, there are a number of things that Nigeria has done in the last 3 months, which I think signal a real commitment to reforms. I mean, part of this is, moving toward just the passage of the amended budget, I think is a big positive in terms of clearly laying out the government's intentions. I think the move towards exchange rate unification will help. One thing that many people don't realize is that it will actually help in terms of the original priority that I mentioned, which is marshaling fiscal resources. That change, moving towards the official rate, moving towards a more market-reflective rate, will bring more resources into the federation accounts. And that means that the government will then have more resources to spend to properly protect livelihoods and economic activity. I think the move towards a market-based gasoline pricing is also something to be very...
I know that's a whole lot of story. Shubham Chaudhuri, thank you so much for speaking with us tonight.